everyone, welcome back to another episode of Thrive After Divorce, where we want you to not just survive, but thrive. And today I have my bloke from Ireland. I wanted to say that when I was talking to her, she said she had a bloke, and I said, I want a bloke. We have Vicctoria Stakelum. Welcome, Vicctoria.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, and you are the Success Smith.
That's right.
And I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but just to give people a heads up, we are going to talk about being Flawesome.
Yes.
We're going to explain what that term is, how we can be awesome and accept our flaws and enjoy them, embrace them. So welcome, Vicctoria, all the way from Ireland.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
give us a
I'll introduce myself. So I'm Vicctoria Stakelum. I run a little business called the Success Smith, and a big focus of the work I do is helping women, professional women in particular, connect with their power and receive the recognition and success that they deserve and that they want to create in their life. I do that in two ways. So I run a program that's very specifically targeting career success for mid-senior professional women, and I have a wonderful success rate at the women I work with, very rapidly gaining promotions and pay rises, which I'm very proud of and is wonderful work. I also have an integrated therapy practice where I use a combination of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, positive psychology, and energy healing work wrapped within a kind of coaching package. I'm a life and leadership coach, to help women release the emotional and energetic blocks that are holding them stuck. And what's interesting is I'm noticing increasingly those two aspects of my work converge. So I might start working with someone in a professional capacity at the more kind of skill set side of what they need to progress within their career. And then sometimes we run up against deep-seated unhelpful beliefs that have been sabotaging their professional life, sometimes their relationships as well, that it becomes apparent we need to do some deeper change work on to help them let go of so that they can move forward. Sometimes it's their own narrative getting in their way. So that's what I do. It's wonderful, fulfilling work. I feel very privileged.
It is. And so much of that wraps into what this show is about as far as divorce, from what I've just heard, that divorce has a great way of bringing those insecurities to the surface in us that are going to show up in our work and our confidence and all those things. But also everything you bring out, which is leadership, that we can talk about a little, that even if someone's listening right now and might think, I'm not in a career position or corporate world, it's really no different. It's still seeing things that you want and knowing you're worthy to get them, whether it's going back to school or applying for the job for the first time in 20 years, whatever it is, it all ties in together to your own internal belief. Yes? Or
it does, absolutely. And I think leadership's an interesting concept, and we perhaps view it through one lens of career or professional life. But we are also leaders within our family, within our community, and perhaps most crucially, we are the leader of ourselves. Yes. And a topic that I address with my clients so often is that of choice, and realizing that they have choice and do get to lead their own lives and choose how to prioritize, who to prioritize, what to prioritize in order to find fulfillment and realize their own personal potential. And what I observe in women in particular is a feeling that life is happening to them rather than them leading life. And perhaps that's why I'm seeing these different types of work that I do converge. I mean, I am a leadership specialist. I spent 25 years in corporate leadership. I didn't start in corporate leadership, but I ended there and spent the latter half of my career there. And it gave me the opportunity to work with so many different kinds of people and learn so much. And I am a psychologist, so applying neuroscience and psychology to how we interact with others, how we perceive our own reality, which is so central to what we experience. We are exposed to 11 million bits of information in any given second. Wow. And we can experience just 130. So we're exposed to this information, but we can only actually experience a minuscule fraction of everything that we are exposed to. And what that means is we have to be selective. And most of us do that on autopilot. All of our childhood experiences and the narrative and belief system that we've built up defines what we perceive to be real, defines everything that we experience. And what's very powerful and profound in a lot of the work I do is when you start helping people bring awareness and intention to that process and start noticing the stories they're telling themselves and the beliefs that they kind of holding themselves back with and where they're placing their focus in their life, it can really be quite empowering very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Because we don't realize, our brain does this filtering at, in milliseconds. We go from the 11 million to the 130 conscious awarenesses, but there's an entire kind of iceberg of stuff below the water that we aren't actually aware of.
Yeah,
in the work I do, we bring awareness to that.
That graph where it like shows the iceberg and our conscious is only like 10% above that line. And then the other 90% of the iceberg is under the line.
Exactly.
Or something like that. But two things that I think of, well, one I wrote, we talked about releasing and then you talked about choice. And I thought they really go hand in hand, that to be able to choose and make choices, many times we have to release our thoughts and our perceptions, and our mind really creates illusions for us that we live in.
Correct.
So many times. And because our thoughts can get going, but they're just our thoughts, it doesn't make them real.
Well, exactly. I mean, very little information is tangible and real.
Yeah. And then, so one, I want to touch on just a minute more of leadership, because it's a word I'd heard my whole life, but I don't think I really came into knowing what leadership was till I went to a 2-week leadership intensive camp. But even then it took me a couple of years to go, to really utilize and work what I had learned. When I caught myself wanting to give up or let back, I'd go, no, wait, this is where my personal leadership comes in. I always think leadership, you think you're the captain of the team, you're the head of the project, but it's much more leadership. And I forgot the other point. But if we can just touch on how you would describe personal leadership, or the word leadership.
Yeah. So I have a framework that I apply in the kind of professional sense of the word leadership that I think is wholly applicable to personal life leadership as well. And it's quite simple, actually, as these things often are when you really boil them down. So for me, leadership is about, I picture it as a 4-box grid. And on one axis, you have self and other. And on the other axis, you have awareness and regulation or intention. So when you put that all together, what does it mean? Well, as a leader, our first job is to become self-aware. To be honest, if we don't have self-awareness, and that's where the Flawesome concept comes in, the awareness of ourself for our strengths and brilliance, but also for our weaknesses and flaws and human frailties and failings. So a deep self-awareness and acceptance of self is kind of the first box. Then it's about being able to regulate ourselves. A lot of the work I do, particularly in the professional space, and I think in the context of your community where, divorce is a difficult thing that may be happening in the background, in the foreground of someone's life, while they are also trying to perhaps maintain a professional persona if they're in that world as well. The ability to regulate one's emotions healthily, not repress emotion, not squash it so that it manifests as dis-ease, but to regulate emotion healthily is the other aspect of that kind of self-leadership that is absolutely key to realizing your potential and to being able to create the performance that you want in your life, the success that you want in your life. Then how does this stuff relate to others and the people around you? And if you're in a leadership position, you know, your team, your peers, your boss. If you're not in that kind of corporate world, you know, your family, your friends, your community, your life. And again, it boils down to awareness and regulation, or intention. So what does awareness mean in that context? It's about being able to genuinely connect with and intuit what is happening with another person. And we can only do that effectively if we have first understood ourselves, honestly, because otherwise what happens is we interpret the other person through that very filtered lens. It's like you've got a pair of glasses on that tells a story that you're a victim, for example. So every interpretation you have of another person, you are making through the lens of that pair of glasses that you've been wearing because sometime, a very long time ago, you made that decision about yourself. You probably don't realize it was a decision you made. You think it's just who you are. It's not. It's that filter down to 130 bits of information. So the first thing is to be able to accurately engage with, understand and intuit what is happening with another person. And then in terms of intention or regulation, it's about how you engage with and influence other people to create the outcomes you want. So in the professional environment, that's about being able to have very adult to adult conversations, give feedback and receive feedback effectively. And actually those same skills are so underutilized in people's private lives. You know, our ex-fella says something about us that we don't like the sound of, and we react rather than bringing curiosity and having done enough soul-searching work of our own that we can take it. We can take what he says because we have either looked at ourselves with sufficient depth that we know there's truth in what he says, but it doesn't blindside us because we've looked at it and we've made a decision. I accept that flaw in myself, or I've already decided I'm going to do some work on it. So him giving us that feedback doesn't kind of throw us out of kilter and create an emotional reaction.
Or you say your or first.
Okay. Or because we've done that work, we know that he's giving us his stuff. It's not about us at all. It's his baggage that he's trying to project onto us. And all of us, in some way, shape or form, are likely to be doing that in our lives unless we've done the kind of work I'm talking about. So that's why that kind of grid of self and other awareness and intentional regulation is so powerful. It kind of covers the very nature of human connection and self-leadership.
It really does. And so that is the best explanation I've ever heard of leadership.
Thank you.
I love it. And I love the idea of self to regulate our own emotion, because if we don't, and we keep putting all this pressure on ourselves, we will explode at a coworker or a child, or internal, will sink.
Yes,
without
absolutely.
being able to regulate. And what you just said, it doesn't matter if you're in the corporate world, you're dealing with an ex-spouse, or you're meeting a potential partner.
Yes.
That if we don't become Flawesome,
yes,
we have to dive into Flawesome.
Yeah.
But we're constantly going to be wearing those glasses.
Yes.
And repeating the same loops. And it's important to be honest with ourselves, regulate our emotions, look at everything you just said, and be able to look in the mirror and say, I'm Flawesome. And I'm good.
Yeah.
So tell us what is being Flawesome, what it means, and why it's so important.
Yeah. So, gosh, where to begin? When I started this journey, when I started the business I'm in, and actually reflecting back on the work I've done over the years as a corporate leader who had coaching very much in the sort of front and center within my leadership career. I'm a psychologist. I'm a psychologist, and I was a leader as coach.
But I mean, so you've got both going on, the business, the leadership, but the understanding of the mind and how
absolutely. Yeah, and also neuroscience, which I specialize in mindfulness, and the neuroscience of that is very powerful in terms of that self-regulation piece. But what I observed, and I know this from myself, is what drove me was being seen as really good at lots of stuff, and it's a classic thing, I think, for kind of high achievers professionally. I also see it all over relationships, landscapes, presenting a version of myself that it takes effort and energy to project out, that appears invulnerable and on it. And I think we do it as mums. I think we do it as professionals. I think we do it in relationships. We project a version of ourselves, and it takes effort and energy to do that. And what I learned over the course of my career supporting other women in particular, I mean, people generally, to realize their potential and progress in a professional context in particular, and more recently in personal life as well, was that really the gap between who I really am and how I really feel, including the things that I'm rubbish at and the things that I don't like about myself, the gap between there and who I'm presenting, which isn't a pretense, it's not someone that I'm not, but it's someone that I'm not all the time and consistently, it's the shiniest version of myself. Yeah, it takes effort. You couldn't be there all the time. So the gap between those two spaces is where a lot of energy is sunk, and it's actually where failure lives. What I noticed was that when I started letting it all hang out a bit, when I let go of presenting this perfect version of myself, professionally and in my relationship, actually, I became more successful. It became more successful. And I am now seeing increasingly, I just had a conversation with a woman in the last couple of days who had spent her whole career trying to not be seen as who she really is, because she's a little bit quirky and unconventional, her words, not mine. And she felt that if she brought that professionally, she would not be taken seriously. And she has never progressed within her career. And I put to her that it's because she spends all this effort and energy hiding who she really is. And then she's overlooked because she's hiding. Yeah. And I also, I've observed this theme that this is present everywhere. We go dating and we present a version of ourselves physically. We make ourselves up. We make sure the legs are shaved. We wear the nice pants. We project this version of ourselves. And of course, at what point do you let that guard down? Be scruffy haired and makeupless and wear your crappy underwear and and say, am I good enough anyway?
Yes.
I had a conversation actually with a man some months ago who he'd started a new job, and we were talking about, his strategy to be accepted and recognized in his new job. And he was working 50-hour weeks because he was in his probation period. And he said to me, it's only until I pass my probation period. And I said, great, what are you going to do then?
And was he required the 50 hours?
No, he was bringing his best self, showing how committed he was, like we do in relationships, like we do at work.
I wanted to clarify
that present.
He was probably required 40, but he was putting in the extra 10.
He had told himself a story that in order to be successful in his probation period, he had to go above and beyond. His actual self was not enough. Does that sound? I bet that resonates with some of the people listening to this. I know it's a story I have told myself.
That's the question I would have for anyone listening right now, is just to stop and take a moment and think, in the beginning of any relationship, do I show up authentically as myself? Yeah. If it's a new employer, if it's you're going on a date, do you really pull something out of your closet, or you go buy something new? Do you wear more makeup, or whatever you would do, or even entertaining in your house?
Yeah.
Do you spiff the house up, or are you good just saying, I'm having a party or a barbecue Thursday night, come over?
Take me as you find me. Yeah. Take me as you find me.
Yeah, like, this is how I really live. This is how my house is. But no, we want to show up in a different way, or present ourselves as awesome rather than flawesome.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I think, you know, putting our best foot forward, you know, connecting with the bits of ourselves that we like best, it's good to do that, right? It's not a bad thing to do that. But when we're pretending, when we're not feeling it and we're pretending we feel a certain way, you know, even beyond wearing more makeup than usual or trying to look a bit different or a bit snazzier, but there's something about when we start laughing at jokes we don't find funny, or pretending we've read books that we haven't read, or feeling the need to, you know, pretending we're really into theatre when we hate it because we want to be liked by the other person.
Picking up a hobby that you really don't like.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's different to being willing to try it out. Being willing to try it out is one thing.
And to be open and say, I don't know, but I'll try it. But that's different than saying, I love to hike. I'm a total outdoorsman, when you really prefer staying at a 4-star hotel. I mean, it's like, to be honest. It's just about being honest, to say,
there's
I'll try it.
There's such an important point to this, because we all hear authenticity is important and it's good, and of course it is. There's a really important reason for this, and I first stumbled across it when I was coaching people around interviews and having confidence for job interviews. But it was a previous conversation that you and I, Lisa, had when we realized this was also a perfect metaphor for new relationships, which is that success comes from a good fit. So when something goes wrong in a job or in a relationship, our inclination is to make the other person wrong, or maybe to make ourselves wrong. I must have not been good enough, or he's a shit and that's why it didn't work, right? We tend to be in one of those two spaces. But actually, often it's that the fit wasn't right. You know, when a job goes wrong, we want to blame our boss for not being a very nice boss, or we want to blame ourselves for being out of our depth and taking something on that we weren't ready for. But often it's just about fit. So when I coach people for interviews, what I'm encouraging them to frame their mindset with is, I don't have to pretend I'm the perfect person for this job. My work in this interview is to be myself, you know, the professional good version of myself, but to not try and buff myself up or pretend I'm anything I'm not, to show my genuine passion and enthusiasm and be myself. And if I don't know something, to confess that, but say I'm absolutely willing to learn if I'm absolutely willing to learn.
Yes.
And then if I don't get the job, quite frankly, it was a lucky escape because I wasn't a good fit for it. It doesn't mean I'm not worthy. It doesn't mean I wasn't good enough. It just means the fit wasn't there. But what we actually do is we try and pretend we're a certain something. And if we get the job under that pretense, it often doesn't work out. We're not a good fit for the culture, or we do feel a little bit out of our depth, and then our confidence suffers and we get smaller and smaller within it and we can't thrive. And it's the same in relationships. Yeah. When I'm dating, my job is not to try and be dazzlingly stunning and perfect and the best in bed and, you know, the most well-read and bright and marvelous. It's to be myself.
And conform to what the other person is looking for.
Exactly. Because if I manage to snare that person through that pretense, that relationship, well, I can't imagine how that could ever be successful. Or if it did, it would be at some great personal cost to me. Whereas if I bring myself, yes, perhaps my slightly shinier version of myself because it's new and it's exciting and I want to kind of, you know, connect with that best place within me, then if that person doesn't want me, you know, if they're not so into me, well, that doesn't mean I wasn't good enough for them. It just means the fit wasn't right. But we so often make it about our self-worth, don't we? We feel rejected.
Yes, especially when we're coming from a vulnerable place anyway.
Of course, yeah.
And even, you know, that could be in a career. You could have been bullied in your last job. You could have been passed up for a promotion. It all ties together. But you know what's coming to my mind that's just so, like, to me, an analogy. First, I have to say, I always, if it's honestly true, I will always say I'm willing to try and I'm willing to learn.
Yes.
And then at the end, then I can truly say, I tried it. It's not for me.
Yeah.
I learned it. I don't enjoy it, but I'm willing to do those things usually, unless it's something where I'm like, no, I'm not. I know my
Unless
limits.
it's a line cross or something like that.
Yeah,
for
or
sure.
something, I have a phobia of certain things. I know I'd be like, no, I'm not jumping out of a perfectly good plane. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, and we're
But
allowed to say, actually,
yeah,
I don't want to
actually,
try that. You're
I
allowed to
want
say
to
that.
skydive, but I don't
Yeah.
want to do it. But here's what I'm thinking. So I have to go get a pair of jeans this weekend for something, and I'm dreading it. I really, but here's the where I'm seeing it tie into this. I know I am going to have to try on quite a few pairs to get the right fit.
Yeah.
And in the process, I'll learn I need a short in this one, or a size in this one, or these run big, or these run smaller. These didn't fit. But it's not that I can't wear jeans. I just have to find the right fit.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
It's just the idea of going into it knowing not every pair I take into that dressing room is going to be for me.
Absolutely. That brings to mind a phrase, Lisa, that I'm a big fan of, that I stumbled across not so long ago, actually, which is that whatever we embark on in life, whatever we try out, we will either get the outcome we want or the learning we need. And I think every job we try that perhaps isn't the right fit, every relationship that doesn't quite work out, or every date that doesn't go the way perhaps we hoped, we may not get that outcome that we had hoped for, but if we can accept and view that experience through the lens of learning, we always learn something about ourselves, about life, and it takes on a different shade than I think. I imagine that if I was on the dating scene now, I'd be quite daunted by it. I know the rules of play have changed a little since I was dating, but if we can bring, instead of fear or this sense of I've got to prove myself worthy, if we can instead bring curiosity, I'm going to lean into this and I'm just going to wear it light and be curious, and the outcome will be what the outcome will be. And if it's what I want, great. And if it isn't, what can I learn about that? What did it bring up for me? What did I learn about the other person? What did I notice about them? Often, I think, particularly if we've had a challenging relationship that we've walked away from or that we've left behind, the next set of dates or the next burgeoning relationship can be a bit triggering. It can bring stuff up that can be an echo of what went before. And those are wonderful opportunities to use to build that self-awareness, to notice what is coming up for me, and it's uncomfortable. I'm not saying this stuff is easy, but to get uncomfortable with the discomfort of using it as a platform for self-development, for self-awareness. It's really powerful.
I love, and the curiosity, and that applies to more than just work or relationships. Like now I've been single for 10 years. And in that time, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will have their own version, I have learned to grill. I had never known, I always just put the stuff on the plate. It went out the door and came back in cooked.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to work the grill.
Yeah.
I have dabbled into hanging things. I see that a lot in women that are first out, like putting a shelf together.
Yeah.
Hanging a picture. And it's just being curious and thinking, maybe I don't do it perfect or it's not totally centered. I just want to see if it will stay on the wall. I mean,
I hear that and I feel so inspired by it, because I think it's, relationships are great and perhaps it's something many of us aspire to. And yet in some way, we do give up a little part of ourselves to be in a relationship. And sometimes what we give up is that willingness to hang a picture frame or put some shelves together for ourselves, because there's that kind of unspoken or unwritten thing that that's the guy stuff.
Yeah. Or even I had to figure out how to open hard jars. Like now, if you came to my house, I have a drawer. I have contraptions. I've got these rubber grippy things. I have a plastic thing that I can squeeze.
Yeah.
But there was no one to say, can you open this?
Yeah. So you had to empower yourself to figure out strategies and tools to do it yourself. What a brilliant metaphor for life.
It is, but
Jarring.
sometimes you have to be put in that position. And I would challenge anyone, even if you're not in the position, to try it. Just be curious of, like, if even asking you, Victoria, to go, what is one thing that you just, it's become your husband's job?
Oh, I could list many of them.
But if you just said, I'm going to tackle one, I'm going to like give myself the mental puzzle.
Yeah.
To say, I'm going to do it. And let him stand back in amusement or whatever. But just because we get comfortable. Of course, when I got divorced, I had to go buy a toolbox. And I remember walking through the hardware store, like, because I had to use a dime for a screwdriver.
Yeah.
But my ex-husband, washing machines had changed so much. He was like, I don't know how to run the washer. This looks like a space machine. Like, what do I do? We both had our little challenges, so we all have them.
Absolutely. Do you know, it's so funny you mentioned a toolkit. Before I was married, I was single for many, many years before I met my husband, and I was happily single. I loved being independent, and I had a toolkit, and it was pink and flowery. It was like a lady toolkit that someone once gave me as a silly Christmas gift, and I was really handy at hanging pictures and putting things together. And when my husband and I were very first together, I remember we bought some bedside cabinets as flat pack furniture, and we raced to put them together, and I beat him, and my bedside cabinet was better quality. And yet over the next perhaps 3 years, my toolkit kind of got absorbed into his and then disappeared, and like that stuff became his thing. Like, it's terrible, really. It's all very conventional, isn't it? And now I don't do any of that. If I want something done, I'm like, can you? And then I nag. It's terrible.
So symbolic of what literally happens to us. Parts of us start to evolve. Yeah. We merge, and we lose part of ourselves. And not that that's a bad thing, but we just somehow, parts of us, it's a beautiful thing in a lot of ways that we merge and become one with somebody else.
Yeah.
But it's fun. And other things came up. You've had children and you take on different skills.
Yeah.
But just to find yourself again and just think, you know what? I'm doing something that you normally do.
Yeah, I'm going to go and hang a picture now. After this call, Lisa, I've got to go and hang a picture just to prove to myself that I still can.
Go build a treehouse.
Oh, yeah.
You know what else sticks out? Because, you in Ireland and me in the US, I love your terms. And to me, if I could put a different term on it, because your terms seem fun to me, they're not negative. Right. Like, for me to say, that's garbage, that's crap, that's whatever, it's negative. But when if I go, that's rubbish, it just seems fun to me.
Well,
rubbish.
There is a really interesting psychological tool there that may be helpful to you, Lisa. So some of my clients struggle with the internal narrative, the unhelpful internal narrative. It's garbage, it's I'm garbage. I have clients that struggle with those kind of voices that they talk to themselves in. And something that has proven really effective is for us to give that voice a silly personality. One of my clients, she made her internal voice Tweety Pie, the cartoon character, and whenever that unhelpful narrative was playing, she taught herself to hear it as Tweety Pie, kind of giving her this nonsense chatter. And then it was so much easier for her to see it for what it was, which was rubbish.
Yes, I coach people to do, name the personality types that's coming up. This is just scaredy cat, she needs to go away, or this is to name them. But when we can change, the first time I heard you say bloke instead of friend, I was like, okay, I want a bloke. I'm getting a bloke. I want a bloke. And then now I know in my head, if I just were like, that's rubbish and I'm Flawesome. Instead of that's garbage and I suck and I'm not ready to say I'm awesome. That sounds arrogant. But to go, I have flaws. I accept them.
Yeah.
Some of them are rubbish.
Who doesn't?
Some are true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you think of Flawesome, how to not let it become a scapegoat for someone to be like, I have flaws and I don't have to work on them.
Yeah.
I'm Flawesome.
Yeah,
That
that's
fine line of knowing there are things that I can fix about myself if I want to.
Yeah.
And then there are things that are just me and I accept it. You know what I'm saying? The difference.
I do.
Because if you do, go ahead.
Well, so I think it brings us back to this concept of choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it also links to that model of leadership, including self-leadership. So the first thing is to look at ourselves and to be honest about the flaws that we have. And that in itself is very hard. And taking on board the feedback that we've received, and I use the term feedback quite broadly, you know, if you think of every argument you've ever had and the unkind things that have been said to you, some of them will have had substance, many of them won't have done, but there is probably something you could have learned from everything that was said to you. And maybe that's a learning about yourself, maybe it's a learning about the other person, or maybe it's a learning about the situation. So really building up that picture of yourself. To your point then, what do you do with that? Which flaws do you take on? And like, how do you not give up on yourself and say, well, I'm not going to do any work on myself? And I think, look, in reality, none of us have to do work on ourselves, but choices have consequences. So if we are really honest with ourselves about where things go wrong, and I really advocate for taking a position of extreme responsibility, and that won't be palatable to everyone, but there's no such thing as reality, right? 11 million bits to 130 bits of information. Reality is something we choose, we create for ourselves. So if you start from that, what you are experiencing, you can choose to accept full responsibility for. And that won't always feel good, but what it is incredibly empowering. Because even if you don't like it, saying that, you know, I own this, not it was my fault, but I am responsible. There's a big difference. Yeah. Because if I am responsible, I get to choose different. And that may take real work on my part. I get to choose different, but I don't have to. And if I don't choose different, I am likely to get what I always got. If I do what I always did, I am likely to get what I always got. So if I have got a series of relationships in which the same patterns have occurred, and I decide not to take something on myself to develop, then I'm going to get what I always got. That pattern is going to keep playing out. I get to do something different, which is to start working on that, and I don't have to. And what I think is really important within that is when we take on that, I want to change, I want to develop something within myself so that I get something different. Yes. It's very easy to feel that I'm somehow broken or damaged, and that's why I'm doing this personal development work. And one of the most helpful reframes on that I have found is to come from a place of believing that actually I am perfect and shiny and beautiful and wonderful within myself. My highest self is all of those things. But through life, you know, we accumulate these stories, this baggage, these beliefs, these narratives, and these experiences that don't help us and don't serve us. You know, I wasn't born codependent or cranky or, you know, I was born kind of pure. Right. And we accumulate these things. So when we're doing that work, it comes back to the word we used earlier, release. Mm-hmm. It's not about becoming someone different. It's not about becoming, it's about releasing all of the rubbish that we've accumulated. I liken it to, we wear a coat with many pockets, and over the years we place a stone in each of those pockets, and by the time you get to your 30s, 40s, 50s, you're like way down by these stones in the pockets. And the work I do, I often liken to, imagine if you could empty the pockets. Imagine how freeing that would be, how light. When we talk about developing ourselves, that's the work. It's not becoming something different, becoming something new. It's actually releasing ourselves back to who we once were.
I love that. And I want a t-shirt or a bumper sticker, not for my car, whatever, that says release the rubbish.
Yeah.
Release the rubbish. And two things. One, to go back, taking responsibility compared to saying it's my fault.
Oh, yes.
So that to me, well, first, I always say, keep doing what you're doing. You're going to keep getting what you got.
Yeah.
So I agree with you there. That is my key. But if we take responsibility, this is a question for you.
Yeah.
That we take responsibility, that gives us power.
Yes.
When we say it's my fault, that gives us guilt.
Yes. Perfect. That distinction is critical. So often we land in powerlessness and guilt.
Yeah, but if we take responsibility, we can change it. We don't repeat it. We can say, yes, I did that. I learned from it and I changed it to get different outcomes if we want. So here's a question I have that I don't even know if there's an answer, but I think you would have one maybe. Either what or who, like society, people, our past, determines it's a flaw. But then you kind of answered it too, that if it's something that it's bringing an outcome to us that we don't like repeatedly. You know, if you keep getting fired because you can't get out of bed because you're oversleeping. I don't know. So you know what I mean? I'm like, who determines what's a flaw?
Yeah. So I guess the answer is all of those things. I mean, often we are our own worst critics.
Yeah.
In unhappy relationships, our partner will often be the source of the feedback that we are so flawed and we're so this and we're so that, and you know, we're intolerable and it's got to change. And we are definitely set expectations by society and each other, and those expectations are often unrealistic, but they can only determine our behavior with our consent, with our kind of complicit involvement in that. You know, we have to buy into them for them to have any power over us.
This question took me down this little rabbit hole in my head going, well, say if you keep getting the same review at work that keeps bringing up the same flaw.
Yeah.
Either that's something you have to work on, or you have to look at it and go, I'm not in the right profession.
Yeah, I'm okay with that flaw, and
like I don't see my quirkiness, like the woman you said, as a flaw.
Yeah,
but maybe it's just not the right fit.
Yes.
So I think it's a matter to me as I'm sitting here trying to think, like, what a flaw? Who's to determine what a flaw? But if it's constantly bringing us grief or strife in our life, then you either have to look and go, is it a flaw or is something not a fit? Is it a flaw or
yeah. And that brings up for me a kind of alternative perspective, which is, how could we ever expect to be perfect? So when we talk about a flaw, like who gets to say who's a flaw, and really it has to be us. If we are empowering ourselves and taking responsibility, we are the person that gets to decide, is this something that I'm going to change?
Society could say your diet's wrong. Society's saying your size is wrong. Society's saying your age is wrong. All these things. But it's up to us to really stop and go, is it a flaw? Am I good with it? And who is perfect? No one. The best you can be is Flawesome.
Yeah. And also, is it a flaw to be a certain age? Is it a flaw to be a certain weight?
That's what I meant. Like, who determines it's a flaw? How do we?
Yeah. I mean, I had a thought then. What was the thought that was at the edge of my brain? Maybe it will come back to me. I've lost it. Yeah.
Okay. I'll come back.
I think that the theme for me within this is that we get to choose. Those expectations can only be placed on us with our permission. If you tell me, Lisa, that I'm too old to start a new career, that was the point. I've just remembered it. A brilliant question to ask ourselves is, Is that true? You know, you should drop a few pounds. Is that true? You're too old to start a new career. Is that true? And to ask that question from a place of real neutrality, because there will almost always be an example you can point to where someone else has done it. And that says it can be done. Is it possible to start a new career in your 50s? Someone might say, no, you're too old. Can it be done? The answer will almost always be yes. Yeah. And then the next natural question is, well, can I do it? That's up to you. Do you want to? Are you willing to put in the effort? Do you accept that there will be failure along the way, but that failure gives you feedback from which you can, it's just a matter of how much you persist.
It is.
Or whether you give up somewhere along the line. And a yes or a success almost always lives in the land of no or failure. So,
say that again?
So a yes always lives in the land of no. Success always lives in the land of failure. You have to get through the stepping stones of the learning and the stumbles and the difficulty to arrive at the goal.
Right. Like it's like going on a hike straight up, but once you get to the top, that's the only way you can see that view. Like,
yeah, you got to kiss a few frogs to find your prince, you know, but that means that each frog you meet, you're one frog closer to your prince. You know?
Yes. Now tell me about, I'm looking at your name in the back, and I mean, I know it's on my screen, the Success Smith.
Yeah.
But Smith is not in at least your name that I see here. So how'd you come up with the Success Smith?
Well, my maiden name was Smith.
Oh, it was.
It was my maiden name.
Oh, okay.
And I also love the concept of what a smith does, what a blacksmith does. We forge useful and beautiful things. Mm-hmm. Using the raw materials that are already available. A smith forges wonderful things within the flames of fire. And I thought that's such a fabulous metaphor for what I do. I help people forge success from often quite difficult circumstances, not always, sometimes they're already successful people. So I thought it was the perfect use of my maiden name and the concept. And really what I specialize is in success on someone's own terms, because I think coming back to the earlier point about the way society and other people create expectation and meaning on us, I'm really interested in people defining what success means to them and making that real within their lives. And that might not be about the high-powered job, or it might not be about the next relationship. It might be about realizing their own independence and finding fulfillment and happiness within, you know, as a single person, for example. So I love the concept of I get to define what success means to me, and then I'm particularly skilled at helping people take off the coat of stones so that they can joyfully kind of elevate towards that.
You know, I think success on your own terms is a really good answer to who determines what a flaw is.
Oh, yes, of course.
Because it depends on success on your own terms. You determine your own flaw scale.
Yeah.
And, you know, the coats with the stones, I did an exercise in a program where we really had to write the things that weigh us down. And we had no idea we were going to have to go stand up like this. And for each thing we wrote down, they literally strapped a weight.
Wow.
You know, like a belt weight. And they're like, that's what you're carrying around. Now imagine for each thing you could release.
Yeah.
You know, but that coat, like if people could really envision that, like, I just want to start taking out one stone at a time. Yeah. One pocket at a time. Not just take the whole coat off.
Yeah.
Don't go crazy.
Yeah.
And so this has just been so intriguing, and I love the outcome is what we want or the learning we need.
Yeah. We get the outcome we want or the learning we need.
Yes. And to just go into things with curiosity. And the conversation we had a different day, just really it comes down so much to just being honest with yourself, your self-acceptance.
Yeah.
and knowing, yeah, when we show up in the beginning, if we set a bar so high, how long can we maintain that perception, that illusion that we're putting off to people for putting in the 50-hour work week for the 40-hour job? How long can you do that?
Yeah. And in the case of the conversation I mentioned earlier, when I asked Affy what's going to happen at the end of that probation, what he realized, and what is so critical here, is that you've created in that moment an impossible situation, because you either have to carry on, and that's exhausting, and burnout and dis-ease live in that direction, or you've trained that employer or that partner to expect that, and they think that's you being normal. So there's disappointment or failure, whichever way you do that. So being yourself from the outset is really so very important. It's never a success strategy to bring that illusion. Never.
You're right. That's never a success strategy.
I can't see how it could be. I've never met anyone yet who's made that work.
No, I mean, it's not. It's like buying something you can't afford. You will run out of money. Like, there's just no way you can maintain that energy without it costing you something somewhere.
Indeed. And I think the costs are quite severe, actually.
So before you tell us where everyone can find you, if you have any last little tips, energy, any Smithisms, any Smithisms that you want to share?
Gosh, so many, really. We've talked about some of them. I think awareness and intention are probably, that's probably at the heart of it. You know, we sometimes self-sabotage because we actually want the successful relationship or the great job, but our behaviors aren't in alignment with what we want. And by bringing intention and awareness, you can get yourself into alignment. So I think that those themes about being intentional, knowing the outcomes you want to create, and being committed to those outcomes, but not being attached to them. So committing to the process of bringing those behaviors that you want to be the version of yourself that you want to be, to connect with that, but not being attached, because the minute you get attached to something and have a kind of expectation that might not be realized, particularly if it involves another person, that's where that kind of disappointment and frustration and resentment can be born, or be
and that's
crystallized.
Where control takes over too. We can become too controlling of outcomes, and that can drive you crazy.
Yeah, really, the only thing we have control over is ourselves.
Yeah.
So we can influence others, absolutely.
Right.
But we have to control ourselves. And it's interesting. Sometimes it can be those of us that have the least control over ourselves are most anxious to control the things and people around us. And there's probably that's one of those awareness cautions.
Because
that's
all you have control over.
At. Sorry?
It's like, because that's all you have control over. So you start to, whatever we have control in our life, like it gets hyper focused. Like,
yeah. But it's actually really empowering to place that hyper focus on yourself and decide what you want and how you're going to kind of move towards it. The minute we focus that control on things beyond ourselves, and that includes, like, you know, our kids, our home, our jobs, things that are under our influence, but that at the end of the day we don't control fully, that's where disappointment and risk lies. So I think awareness, intention, alignment, commitment rather than attachment, and taking a position of extreme responsibility, not because it's true, but because it's empowering. Not because it's true, but because it's empowering, is incredibly liberating. That's probably the kind of thought to leave your listeners to.
I just have one question on that, because I'm thinking too, like the mom, say you're very your control is the groceries, buying the food for the house.
Yeah.
And you put everything into it and you're all excited and you make this dinner and your family doesn't like it.
Yeah.
And I think like with that metaphor or analogy, we have to know our intent, that person fulfilled their intention, creating a healthy dinner, trying something new, but we can't control the outcome because sometimes that can lead to us getting upset.
That's a brilliant illustration of the concept of commitment versus attachment.
Yeah,
so if I commit to the process, I get to feel good about that.
Yeah.
If my family don't like it, I still get to feel good about having put my all into the dinner, and I've learned something. I didn't get the outcome I wanted, but I got the learning. That's
because
helpful
I think that's
to me.
something, if we can all relate to it, I've been there, where it's like, what? I just put all this work and everything and you guys only ate one bite?
Yeah.
But that's being committed to the outcome.
It's being attached to the outcome. Yeah.
To the outcome. Like, and then they're all gonna love it. And no, but I did what I set out to do.
Yeah.
And I learned.
Yeah. And there's something in there where the motivation was the approval of others. That's never a great place to find our motivation, because we won't always get the approval of others. Where if we can learn to feel flawesome and approve of ourselves, we're not as reliant on that approval of others. And then if they don't like the meal, we'll bugger them. I did a lovely job and I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed cooking it, and I put my all into it. And I think that's a really beautiful illustration of the difference between commitment and attachment, and the consequences of your motivation being too extrinsically focused, too much about other people, and too much about attachment to a notion of how things should be. And that's not a happy way to live.
No, and I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. We get stuck attached to the outcome. Yeah. And I always say you can set the intention, but we don't know the form it will come.
Yeah.
It's kind of like saying a prayer. You can say the prayer, but we don't know how the prayer is going to be answered.
Yeah.
You just have to at some point trust and just think, what is my intention? Did I fulfill my intention? And the outcome is what it is. And we learn.
Yeah. I do a lot of work in the manifestation space, and that's kind of buzzwordy at the moment. I'm going to manifest the dream man or the dream job or the house I want or whatever. And I've heard people kind of saying, I'm really working hard at manifesting this, and they're kind of because they're really willing it to happen.
Yeah.
And what I know about this space, and I've created a lot of success myself and for others, is that there are actually 4 planes. Sorry, this whole new topic, but I'll do it very quickly. There are actually 4 planes. So that kind of spiritual plane, you do need to be in alignment for good things to happen. You can be taking all the right actions and not getting the outcomes you want because actually energetically you don't believe you're worthy and you're not calling it in. But similarly, if you are manifesting the hell out of it, really kind of spiritually aligning, but not taking any actions in alignment with the outcome you want, you won't get the outcome. You can't manifest that way. And then you've also got the cognitive and the emotional plane. So you've actually, to manifest effectively, you've got 4 planes that you have to be in alignment across: the spiritual, energetic, the emotional, the cognitive, and the action, the behavioral, the tangible. And when you line all of those things up, and that can take a bit of work because our emotions can be out of whack, or the narrative is telling an unhelpful story, but when you line them all up, wow, magic happens. You get what you want in your life, but it's through the commitment to the process. When we try and manifest at the energetic level only, we're really just attaching to something we want, and that doesn't make what we want to happen.
And it's the work in getting those 4 boxes aligned that prepares you to be ready to receive that. Because if you received what you wanted and those boxes weren't aligned, you probably aren't ready.
It won't be sustainable.
It won't be. Yeah, I was gonna say it will slip away. That perfect man will slip away. The job will slip away. So if you line those things up, it will come at the right time.
Yeah.
You need the woo and the do.
Oh, I love it. I've not heard that before, but that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't just hold stones and pray.
Yeah. That just gets heavy.
You can't do all the work and not believe.
That's exactly it. So actually, I've not really thought about it this way before, but really the work I do helps people get aligned across all of those planes in order to create the outcomes they want, hence the success.
You're a success pilot. You just help them get all the planes. And
yeah.
So, Vicctoria, this has been a pleasure. And in my heart, you are my bloke.
I have to tell you, Lisa, in England, when we use the word bloke, it's typically for a male friend.
Oh,
I kind of like it anyway.
What's a female friend?
Well, there isn't a word like bloke that I can think of that translates. So I feel like we have to claim it, actually.
Yeah, bloke it sounds so special. Like, she's my bloke. She's my friend Carolyn. Well,
I think we have to claim it.
Okay.
So I'm going to be your bloke.
Well, it's been such a pleasure to meet you. Tell everyone listening, we will have all your information listed in the show notes, but please tell them where you're at, what you have coming up.
Yeah. So you can find me at thesuccesssmith.com. There's one more S than you're expecting in the middle there. I run a number of free events. So I run a monthly workshop around success for women, typically career orientated success. I also run a monthly I Am Remarkable workshop. That is a campaign that I run in conjunction with Google, where we go through a process to really learn the art of self-advocacy and self-promotion. It's a very powerful workshop. The February one's already sold out, but the March one will become available. And those events you can find me on Facebook and on LinkedIn, and the events are heavily promoted on LinkedIn. In Facebook, I run 2 different communities, one in which I run a free weekly coaching session that's called Breakthrough Coaching with Vicctoria. And I channel the energy for that session using oracle cards that I designed and wrote myself. Sorry?
I said, I want to go to one.
Join the group, Lisa, you're very welcome. And all the back ones are there as well. So if you're called to one, it's because that's got what you need that particular moment that you find it. I also run a group called the Ambitious Women Collective in Facebook. So for people with a particular focus on advancing their careers, there are lots of tools, resources, and a lovely community in there as well. So Ambitious Women Collective in Facebook, Breakthrough Coaching with Vicctoria in Facebook, Vicctoria Stakelum in LinkedIn, and you can get me on the Success Smith.
Listed. So anyone frantically trying to write right now, you don't need to worry about it.
You can relax.
You can relax. And I am wishing you a flawesome day, and I'm going to challenge you to do something you haven't done in a while.
I have to go and hang a picture, don't I? I have to go and get a hammer and nails. And
hang a picture. Your family's going to be like, what are you doing? It's dinner time for you. We're hungry. And you're going to be like, I'm hanging a picture.
I'm connecting with my younger self who used to be able to put together flat pack furniture brilliantly.
Yeah. You need to redo that. You need to have a race with him now. See if you still have the title.
I think you're right. I think there's a good call there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Vicctoria. It was an absolute pleasure.
It was great fun, Lisa. Thank you for having me.